My husband faked his death, but I discovered he was cheating with my best friend. After 6 years of marriage, I received the news that my husband had died in a car accident. I spent 4 years mourning him, tears streaming down my face every day. But on our 10th anniversary, I saw him kissing my best friend. I went mad and rushed up to them. In the ensuing struggle, my husband pushed me to the ground. My head hit the stone hard, and in an instant, blood stained the pavement. All I could see were my husband and best friend mocking me as they walked away. A tall man approached me, and I gradually slipped into unconsciousness. Staring at the discounted vegetables in the supermarket, I hesitated over and over. Recently, Ryan's company has been underperforming, and our household expenses have started to exceed our income. If only these vegetables were a little cheaper. I picked up a box of meat and quietly put it back. But the thought of my husband working hard every day without even a decent meal made me feel a bit reluctant. Just as I hesitated, my phone in my pocket rang. The words husband flashed repeatedly on the screen, adding a touch of happiness to my otherwise tight and bitter life. Hello, husband, I'm at. Vivian, there's a lot going on at work today. I have to work overtime. Don't make a fuss, just don't wait for me to eat, okay? I'll probably sleep at the office tonight. Before I could finish speaking, Ryan hurriedly interrupted me. But be good, Vivian. Once I finish more orders, life at home will get better. I'll come back to be with you then, okay? After saying that, he immediately hung up. But didn't he promise me he would come back today to have dinner with me? Was the female voice on the phone just my imagination? I shook my head, dismissing the thought. Ryan and I have had a good relationship all these years, he wouldn't betray me. He must really be busy. Not long after I got home from the supermarket, I received a call from my best friend. Vivian, woo-woo, what should I do? Scarlett was sobbing uncontrollably on the other end. I tried to soothe her, urging her to calm down. But what I didn't expect was that Scarlett's next words would be a true bolt from the blue. Vivian, Ryan is dead. I, who had been comforting Scarlett, felt as if someone had hit the pause button. I stood there stunned. What did you say? You're lying to me, right? I couldn't believe my ears and kept asking Scarlett over and over. Ryan had a car accident on his way home from work and didn't make it. I sat on the floor, stunned and dazed, my mind completely blank, feeling as if the whole sky had collapsed. Impossible, impossible. Which hospital are you at? I want to see Ryan. I asked Scarlett in a breakdown. After getting the hospital address, I didn't even change my clothes and rushed out immediately. Ryan had clearly said he was working late at the company. There was no way he could have come back. None of this made sense. But all my hope shattered into nothingness the moment I saw Ryan's body covered with a cloth. I desperately rushed forward, trying to lift the cloth to see him one last time. But Scarlett and the doctor stopped me firmly. Vivian. Don't look. Ryan was hit so badly he's barely recognizable. Please leave him a shred of dignity. I want to see him one last time. I cried, struggling to break free from their hold. Then, something like a needle pricked the back of my neck, and I immediately fainted. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital bed, and Scarlett was sitting beside me. Vivian, you're finally awake. You fainted from overwhelming grief. You scared us all to death. Scarlett's face no longer showed the sorrow I had seen before. Understandably, since she wasn't as close to Ryan, she probably found it easier to move on. Ryan, my voice trembled uncontrollably, as if I was about to break down again at any moment. Vivian, I'm so sorry. Ryan couldn't be saved. The accident was severe, and the hospital urged us to act quickly. I made the decision for you to proceed with the cremation. You need to focus on recovering your health first. I'll handle everything for the funeral. Ryan wouldn't want to see you this devastated, Scarlett said, tears welling in her eyes as she held my hand and comforted me earnestly. Scarlett had been my best friend for over 10 years. At a time like this, if she hadn't been by my side, I wouldn't have known what to do. After her persistent encouragement, I finally let her take care of Ryan's funeral arrangements. I went to the scene once midway, and just as Scarlett predicted, I fainted again from overwhelming grief. In the blink of an eye, my husband Ryan had been dead for 4 years. During these 4 years, I washed my face with tears every day, crying until I became numb. Scarlett has been by my side all these years, but it seems she started seeing a new boyfriend. Probably so I wouldn't be too upset, she never told me and even went on dates secretly to keep me in the dark. But as her best friend, how could I wish for her unhappiness just because I lost my husband? Today is the 10th anniversary of my marriage to Ryan, and also the day Scarlett said she would come to see me. I had planned to take this opportunity to tell her I knew about her relationship, so she could relax and date without worrying about my feelings. But when I went downstairs to take out the trash, I ran into Scarlett and her boyfriend at my house. Just as I was about to greet them, her boyfriend turned around, and I saw a face exactly like my husband Ryan's. They embraced and kissed, and the man's eyes were filled with a doting love, a fierce love I had never seen when I was with Ryan. Ryan, you better go quickly. We're right under your building. What if Vivian sees us? Scarlett coquettishly tapped Ryan's chest. So thrilling, isn't it? You love that rush, don't you? Otherwise, how could you have acted so convincingly when we planned my fake death? Ryan gently stroked Scarlett's lips, his eyes full of desire. If they weren't out in public, they'd probably be tearing each other apart in bed by now. Ryan? I ran over and pulled them apart, shouting at the man in despair. Clearly, neither of them expected me to come down, their faces instantly filled with panic. Vivian. Let me explain. Scarlett hurriedly tried to say something to me, but with everything I'd just seen and heard, what was there left to explain? Explain? Explain to me how you two ended up together, or is it that Ryan never actually died and this was all a scheme you planned to deceive me? I sneered at the two of them. Or maybe explain why my closest best friend turned out to be the one who betrayed me the worst? Enough, Vivian. Ryan interrupted my accusations, stepping in front of Scarlett. Yes, we lied to you, but wasn't it all because you couldn't have children? Did you want to end our family line by being with me? His words felt like a knife stabbing into my chest. He had known since we started dating that my uterine lining was too thin for me to have children. When he proposed, he cried repeatedly, telling me he never wanted me to have kids in this lifetime, as long as I was healthy. Yet in the end, it was because of the child that he chose to hurt me and leave. You don't love me anymore, you could have just told me you wanted a divorce, so why lie to me like this? My tears fell onto the back of my hand, as if burning through my skin. Divorce? Everyone knows I'm a good husband, including the bosses I work with. If I divorced you, wouldn't I be branded a heartless man? Ryan sneered, his eyes completely devoid of any affection for me. Aren't you a heartless man now? I screamed in despair, only to be shoved to the ground by Ryan. My head slammed hard against a stone, pain flooding through me, leaving me unable to utter a single word. Vivian, just consider your husband dead. Scarlett had you sign the divorce papers while I was faking my death. From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other. The only one I love is Scarlett. Ryan showed no intention of helping me, just watching the blood continuously trickle from my head. Ryan, is she okay? Scarlett, after all, was a girl and a little scared. She's fine. She threw herself and fell, what does that have to do with us? With that, he pulled Scarlett into his arms and got into the car, driving away. Am I really going to die like this? My eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Before I closed my eyes, it seemed I saw a tall man running toward me with a face full of worry. Awake? A gentle female voice sounded beside me. It was the nurse in charge of my bed, a lively young girl, but her eyes carried a calmness that came from having witnessed life and death many times. How do you feel? Any particular discomfort? She came to the bedside and adjusted the 4-drip rate. I shook my head, trying to speak, but found I didn't even have the strength to utter a word. Get some more rest. You hit your head and suffered a trauma. You were probably too agitated at the time of injury, causing your blood vessels to dilate, which made the bleeding much worse than usual. Luckily, your husband brought you here in time, or you might not have survived. The young nurse checked the medical chart as she explained what had happened while I was unconscious. My husband? Ryan wasn't with Scarlett? Would they even bring me to the hospital? Yeah, that tall, handsome one. When he brought you in, he was so anxious, sweating all over, looked like he was about to cry. Seeing that I was out of danger, the nurse boldly teased me about my husband right in front of me. Your husband really cares about you, she said, pushing the cart toward the next room. Tall and handsome? Although Ryan isn't short and looks decent, he probably wouldn't be described that way. So who exactly was the person who brought me to the hospital? Just as I was thinking this, the door to the ward was pushed open, and a tall man walked in carrying an elegant takeout box. Ethan? I stared at the man in shock. He didn't seem to notice my expression and busied himself unpacking the food onto the small dining table. Ethan was, in a way, my childhood playmate. When we were kids, I was very clingy to him. He was like a brother to me, and being with him made me feel safe. But after he found out I was with Ryan, Ethan gradually disappeared from my life. Later, when Ryan and I got married, Ethan had already gone abroad. Immersed in my happiness and also afraid that Ryan might mind my childhood bond with Ethan, I naturally never asked about him. I looked at the man bustling around for me, and the heartache Ryan had caused me somehow felt a flicker of warmth. Did you save me? I asked him. Yeah. Ethan clearly didn't want to talk much, but thoughtfully handed me the chopsticks. Eat, it's all clean food. I don't remember Ethan ever being this cold before. I stared at the dishes in front of me, but had no appetite at all. I don't want to eat. As soon as I put down the chopsticks, Ethan immediately took them away. He lifted my bowl and, with just a bit of food, brought it to my mouth. Ethan. I said I have no appetite, why are you doing this? Though weak and refusing with my words, I had no real strength behind it. Waiting to die because you have no appetite? All because of that man who faked his death, cheated on you, and lied to you? From the moment I met Ethan, his tone had been like this, cold and emotionless. Then why didn't you just let me die? Why did you have to save me? A wave of grievance surged in my heart. My life has been so miserable already, so what are you still angry at me for? Tears streamed down uncontrollably, as if releasing all the pent-up sorrow at once. Seeing me cry, Ethan didn't know what to do for a moment. He pulled me into his arms but, afraid of hurting the wound on my head, he held me gently and cautiously. Don't cry anymore. You're not in a state to be so emotional right now. Ethan finally softened from his usual cold demeanor, trying to comfort me but unsure of what to say. Weren't you abroad? Why are you back now? I blew my nose after finishing crying, looking at Ethan who was peeling an apple for me. I came back 4 years ago. He was usually quite caring, so why did he sound so indifferent now? 4 years ago, that was the year Ryan faked his death. Back then, I was too heartbroken to pay attention to anything else. Then why didn't you come to find me? I asked him in a muffled voice. Ethan's hand paused mid-apple peeling, as if lost in thought. I did come to find you, he said, staring at the apple in his hand. But you were completely consumed by grief over Ryan's faked death. I felt like I wasn't the right person to show up at that time. So he had actually come to see me back then. The hospital room fell into a deathly silence. I didn't even know what to say to Ethan after so long apart. He put on his coat and naturally cleared the dishes from the table. You rest well today. I'll come see you again tomorrow. Before leaving, he raised his hand as if to ruffle my hair like when we were kids, but then remembered my head was injured and withdrew his hand. Actually, I had so many questions I wanted to ask him: why he happened to be there when I got hurt, how he knew about Ryan's faked death and affair. I wanted to ask if he had known all along, but in the end, the words stuck in my throat and all I could say was okay. Ethan came to the hospital every day without fail, bringing me meals and taking care of me until I was discharged. "Thank you for everything lately," I said, watching him hustle around loading all my hospital things into his car. I originally wanted to help, but he refused every time. "Get in the car." His beautiful business van was turned into a cargo truck by my stuff. Just as I placed my hand on the rear door, Ethan yanked open the passenger door. "Sit here, the front seat has a better view." I didn't bother being polite and got into the passenger seat directly. "Going back to that home?" Ethan asked as he buckled his seatbelt. "Yeah, which home should I go back to?" After my parents passed away, I drifted from one relative's house to another. It wasn't until after college, when I started working and renting a place, that things stabilized a bit. I finally married Ryan and had a home of my own, only to be deceived and betrayed. That home, even though I bought it before marriage, just thinking about the place Ryan and I lived together makes me feel sick. "How about staying at my place first?" Ethan probably saw me lost in thought and interrupted at the right moment. "Don't dwell on the past. Your main task now is to heal properly. Even though you're out of the hospital, you still need to keep resting. Go to your place?" "Us, a man and a woman, wouldn't that be a bit inappropriate?" I had thought that after this hospital visit, Ethan and I would go back to how things were before, but I didn't expect him to actually ask if I wanted to stay at his. "No, I'm not home often, and the house is basically empty. Just feel at ease and stay there." Although he still looked indifferent, I could feel his concern. Since Ethan had said so much, I couldn't really refuse him anymore, so I agreed. He drove the car up to a detached villa. "Get out and wait for me for a moment, I'm going to park the car." "Oh, okay." I suddenly turned to get out, forgetting that my seatbelt wasn't undone yet. The seatbelt yanked me back, and my head slammed hard against the seat. Ouch! Although the wound had mostly healed and the car seat was soft leather, the impact still hurt quite a bit. Just as I was about to touch my head to see if I was okay, another large hand covered mine first. "Are you all right? Why are you still so dazed?" Ethan unbuckled my seatbelt and checked my head. After confirming I was fine, he got out of the car himself and opened the passenger door for me. While he was parking, I took a careful look at the unfamiliar villa before me. Ethan's experiences over the years were like this villa, full of unknowns, but all of it was because of me. "Let's go home." I was still thinking about what Ethan had gone through during the time we hadn't been in contact when he finished parking and stood behind me. He didn't ask what I was thinking, he just grabbed my things and headed into the villa. Such a tall man carrying 2 Hello Kitty luggage bags honestly felt a bit out of place. The villa's decor was just like him, gray and white tones, cold and desolate, with only a few basic pieces of furniture. Someone who used to like sky blue just like me, yet there wasn't a single thing related to blue in the house. He led me to the master bedroom door. "From now on, you'll live in the master bedroom. You can put your things wherever you want. If you don't like the decor, I'll find a designer for you later. Just tell them how you want it changed." "The master bedroom? Then where will you live?" "Well, the master bedroom was originally empty. I usually stay in the study." Ethan pointed to the study opposite the master bedroom. "But most of the time, I'm at the company, so just treat this as your own home." After hearing Ethan say this, I really felt more at ease. After all, it's not like guests live in the master bedroom. There's a maid who comes to clean every day. They have their own keys. If you run into them, don't mind it. I'll tell them to only clean your room when you say so. Ethan went over everything in detail. Since the last time I saw him, this was the first time he spoke so much. That should be about it. If you need anything or don't know something, just ask me anytime. Ethan glanced at his phone to check the time. I'm heading to the company now. I have some things to handle. Make yourself at home. After Ethan finished speaking, he turned to leave, but I called out to him. What's your phone number? I was supposed to ask him, but with him being away from home so often, where else could I ask? My phone. I obediently handed him my phone. His long fingers tapped around on it before handing it back to me. I've saved my number on Facebook, you can change the contact name yourself. Then Ethan went off to work. I looked at his contact info in my phone, quietly changed the name to his, and then went back to the bedroom. When Ethan spoke earlier, I hadn't really paid attention to the master bedroom's decor. Now I noticed the whole room was styled in the warm yellow tones I used to like. On the bedside table was a small blue cloud night light. Every detail matched my aesthetic perfectly, except this room clashed with the rest of the villa's style. I quietly took out my things and put them away. Although Ethan was willing to let me stay at his place, we were just childhood friends after all, so living here long-term wouldn't be appropriate. That's why I hadn't brought many belongings with me. After tidying up, I set about preparing to sell the house where Ryan and I used to live. Although the place wasn't big, it was in the city center, so selling it wouldn't be difficult. There were plenty of agents interested in taking it over. Once I sold that house and bought a new one, I wouldn't have to keep bothering Ethan. Just as I was thinking this, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ethan, and I quickly answered. I should be home early this morning. If you mind, I can leave earlier tomorrow. His voice carried a hint of exhaustion. Overtime must be tiring. I don't mind. Come back, this is your home. You don't have to worry about me, I said. Even though I was clearly living under someone else's roof, he was the one being so cautious. Okay. With that, he hung up without a word more. Because my injury hadn't fully healed, I finished my shower early and lay down in bed. When there were people around, I never let my mind wander to all sorts of messy thoughts, but now that I was alone, I found myself staring at the ceiling, slipping into memories without even realizing it. I thought back to the days in college when I was dating Ryan, and then to the time I introduced Scarlett to him. I loved them both so much back then that I couldn't see things clearly. Only now, looking back, do I realize the truth. When we were dating, Ryan wouldn't let me look at his phone. He would take calls and chat far away from me. When I brought him to meet Scarlett, their not-so-innocent glances exchanged between them. When Ryan faked his death, he wouldn't let me see the body or attend the funeral. One scene after another started to become clear. Unconsciously, my tears soaked into the pillow. Why, after all the pain they caused me, did I still cry for them? I just kept crying until I fell asleep. That night, I dreamed someone came to my side, a warm hand gently wiping away my tears. The next morning, I told Ethan that the maids had come to clean the villa. Compared to me, they seemed even more surprised. But out of professional courtesy, they didn't ask me any questions and just greeted me politely. Passing through the living room, a photo on the table caught my attention. I walked over and realized it was a picture of Ethan and me from high school. I used to have a copy of this photo too, but after marrying Ryan, he threw them all away, claiming he didn't want to see me so close to another man. Even my old graduation photos were gone. I touched the photo, tracing the younger version of myself. I had once been a top liberal arts student admitted to a prestigious university, with articles published in several well-known newspapers. I had the chance to become a planning director at a leading company, but in the end, I returned to family life because of Ryan and his parents' coaxing. I remember the year I graduated. Just by helping others with their proposals, I earned a considerable income. After getting married, Ryan kept it a secret from his mother that I might have difficulty having children, because he was afraid she wouldn't accept me. As a result, every year his mother pressured me to have a baby. Ryan always used excuses like there's no way or I can't bring myself to say it to brush me off. Eventually, he persuaded me that even though I couldn't have children, I could stop working and pretend to be pregnant at home to fool his mother for the time being. Because I was blinded by love, I agreed to this plan and gradually returned to the home, becoming a bona fide housewife. Over time, I became more and more disconnected from society, while Ryan's company flourished. I don't know when he and Scarlett got involved, but since they've already hurt me once, I won't give them a second chance to hurt me again. My hand holding the photo frame gradually turned white from gripping it so tightly. After dinner, the agent messaged me saying that a buyer had been found for my apartment, but the buyer didn't have enough money at the moment and was willing to pay half the deposit to hold it for a few months. A deposit is usually only about 20%, but this buyer was willing to put down half. It seemed they truly liked the house. Although I really didn't want to keep bothering Ethan, I couldn't bear to turn down a buyer who genuinely loved my property, so I agreed through the agent. After finding a job, I could just rent a place for the time being. I tried applying to several reputable companies. Although my education and parts of my resume looked quite good, as a 30-year-old unmarried woman without children, many companies still rejected me. Though it was a bit disheartening, I didn't give up. I kept researching and sending out resumes continuously for several days, and finally, one company gave me an interview opportunity. The name Ethan Family Group Venture Capital sounded somewhat familiar. It reminded me of the Ethan Family Group Venture Capital mentioned in the news, but I shook my head. Impossible, that is one of the top venture capital firms in the country, filled with young and accomplished people, and my expertise doesn't even fit their company. Although I was convinced it was absolutely impossible, when I arrived at the address and stood beneath the Ethan Family Group Venture Capital building, it felt like I was dreaming. Having been out of work for so long, I felt a bit insecure as I stepped into the building. "Hello, ma'am, do you have an appointment?" the young receptionist asked me with a smile. "Hello, I'm here for an interview." I showed her the interview appointment details. The professionalism of the Ethan Family Group staff was indeed impressive. They treated us interviewees with utmost respect and patience. Following the receptionist's directions, I successfully caught the elevator up to the interview location. "Oh, Vivian, even a housewife like you is coming to interview at the Ethan Family Group?" Scarlett didn't bother pretending to be close with me when she saw me. She openly mocked me in front of all the other candidates. Although I haven't worked for a long time, my appearance is still decent. I even made an effort to dress up for the interview. Without looking at my resume, it would be hard to tell that I'm already 30. She looks like she just graduated, and she's a housewife? Has the Ethan Family Group lowered their interview standards that much? Hearing Scarlett's words, the other candidates started whispering and speculating about me and the company's hiring criteria. "Scarlett, if someone with your bad reputation can come to interview, why can't I?" Although Scarlett and I have known each other for over 10 years, her academic record isn't as good as mine. I got into a prestigious university back then, while she only got into an average one, though we studied the same major. But she had more work experience than me, and with the help of her family, she had been promoted several times. This time, she probably came because she saw the position of planning director at Ethan Family Group was open. After all, Ethan Family Group's status among national enterprises is truly top tier. Hearing me say she was unscrupulous, Scarlett angrily pointed at me, stammering, you, for a long time. I didn't bother arguing with her. After all, if I wanted to turn things around and get revenge, this interview was really crucial for me. TCH, what good is graduating from a prestigious school? You have no work experience. The fact that you even got an interview means someone messed up during the background check. Scarlett completely dismissed me. She knew better than anyone how I had spent these past few years. I didn't even glance at her, just kept reinforcing and perfecting the material I had prepared, to avoid any mistakes during the interview. After half an hour, it was finally my turn. As I passed by Scarlett, she stretched out her leg and tripped me. I nearly lost my balance and fell, but fortunately, another candidate nearby caught me just in time. However, I still ended up twisting my ankle. I glared back at Scarlett, then limped over to the interview room door, dragging my injured foot. To show my best self, I forced myself to act as if nothing was wrong and knocked on the door. "Come in." A deep, pleasant, yet somewhat familiar voice came from inside. Curious, I opened the door and stepped in. There, I saw Ethan sitting right in the center among the 5 interviewers, his presence even more commanding than usual, giving off a clear keep-away vibe. I froze for 2 seconds, then quickly made my way to my seat. The pain from my twisted ankle made me break out in a cold sweat as I walked. "Is this candidate feeling very hot?" one of the interviewers kindly asked, noticing the sweat pouring down my face. No, I just tend to sweat easily," I replied with a smile to the interviewer. Ethan in the middle only glanced up at me briefly. I proceeded with my interview in an orderly manner. Thanks to the constant preparation over the past few days, judging by the interviewers' expressions, they seemed quite satisfied with me, except for the expressionless Ethan, whom I found a bit hard to read. After the interview ended, I was about to stand up, bow to the interviewers, and leave, but after sitting for so long, the twisted part of my body made it difficult to stand. I leaned on the table, struggling to get up, only to break out in a sweat from the pain. "That's the end of the interview," Ethan said, placing the items in his hand on the table, addressing the other interviewers before walking straight toward me. Then, in front of all the interviewers, he suddenly scooped me up horizontally in his arms. Nervously, my hands instinctively curled around his neck. To be honest, the scene did feel a little ambiguous. As Ethan carried me away, I could still hear the interviewers behind us teasing and whispering, "I knew it, why else would the CEO suddenly create a new position for a planning director at our company? Turns out the madam is coming to work here." Although Ethan and I weren't that kind of couple, their words still made my face flush red. He carried me through another door and back into his office. "How did you get hurt?" He gently set me down on the desk. The huge office, like his home, was utterly lifeless. I twisted it accidentally. I didn't want to reveal my sordid past to him, so I made up a casual excuse to fool him. "Want me to check the surveillance?" His words were devoid of emotion, yet they carried an authority that made it impossible to ignore. "You were tripped." "Scarlett?" He said Scarlett's name so naturally that I couldn't help but look at him with a puzzled expression. "No need to look at me like that. I've basically known everything about you all these years." As he spoke, he was icing my sprained foot. "Why?" I stared at him steadily. Ethan looked up and met my gaze, but I couldn't decipher the swirling emotions in his eyes. "I just wanted to see what's so good about the person you insist on being with." His words seemed to burst out through clenched teeth, tinged with anger. "Yeah, back then, before Ethan left, he came to see me once. He asked, 'Ryan isn't a good person. Are you really going to be with him?' At the time, I was angry with him for saying Ryan was no good. As a result, this time, after getting angry, we never had a chance to make up again. I should have listened to you back then," I said, lowering my head to look at the hand he was using to ice my injury, and gave a self-mocking smile. Clearly, back then, Ethan was the one who cared about me the most, but because of Ryan and his quarrel with him, I sent him abroad feeling upset. "It's not too late to listen to me now," he said, removing the ice pack and carefully examining my ankle. After confirming there was no serious problem, he let go. "Listen to you about what now?" I didn't quite understand what he meant. I was already divorced from Ryan, what could I possibly listen to Ethan about? "Aren't you planning to get revenge?" "I happen to have a project from their family business that's looking for a partner. They take it quite seriously. Come start work tomorrow, and you can handle the negotiations for this project." The Ryan family business had almost gone bankrupt before due to mismanagement, but it seemed they slowly recovered thanks to the cooperation with the Ethan family group. "So, does Ethan want me to use his hand to cut off their lifeline?" "Ethan, why have you helped me so much? I had a big fight with you over Ryan before. Don't you hate me? Even though I was the one who did wrong, why does he seem not to blame me at all? That was your choice. Any choice you make is the right one." I won't blame you. Even now, I will support everything you want to do. There was an emotion in Ethan's eyes that I couldn't understand, but I knew something between us seemed different. Following Ethan's instructions, I started working at the Ethan family group the next day. Just as I arrived at the entrance, I saw Scarlett angrily arguing with the receptionist. It should be said that she was the one verbally abusing the receptionist. On what grounds does the Ethan family group cancel my interview qualification? Am I not qualified enough for your Ethan family group? Bring out your CEO. Scarlett shouted at the receptionist like a shrew, and the girl was almost in tears from her scolding. Scarlett, why are you yelling at that poor girl like that? I really couldn't stand it anymore, so I walked over to shield the girl at the front desk. Vivian? What are you doing here? Scarlett looked puzzled as to why I was still at Ethan family group after the interview. From her perspective, I should have been rejected. I'm an employee of Ethan family group now. If I'm not here, then where else would I be? But you're the one causing a scene here at Ethan family group. I even called security. Seeing us so tense and hostile now, it's hard to believe we used to call each other best friends. You're just a housewife who's never even attended a class after graduating. Vivian, did you secretly sleep with some leader or something? I couldn't understand why Scarlett, a girl herself, would so naturally spread such nasty rumors about another girl. Although I did get into Ethan family group through Ethan's connections, there's nothing going on between us. Scarlett, you'd better watch your mouth, or don't blame me for spreading all the dirty little secrets between you and Ryan. Tell me, do you think that might affect the development of the Ryan family business? I looked at Scarlett with a mocking smile. Obviously, when it came to the Ryan family business, Scarlett panicked. After all, a big part of her being with Ryan was because the Ryan family business had revived and was thriving, and Ryan could provide her with many resources and support. You. Scarlett shot me a venomous glare, gritting her teeth, then turned and left the Ethan family group. She was afraid I really had some background in the Ethan family group, and if that affected the Ryan family business, Ryan definitely wouldn't let her off. Thank you, beautiful sister. Are you a new colleague? I'll take you to HR to check in. The receptionist girl I had just helped looked at me gratefully. She had been worried about any problems I might face as a newcomer unfamiliar with the place, but with her help, I quickly completed the onboarding process. It was probably because Ethan had arranged it in advance that I had my own private office right next to Ethan's office from the start. I glanced around the office and noticed there was another door on the wall that separated Ethan's office from mine. Curious, I walked over and opened the door. The person on the other side probably didn't expect me to suddenly open it. The hand that was changing clothes froze. Ethan? I didn't know you were here, sorry. I quickly shut the door and leaned against the wall, my face flushing bright red. I've been married before, so why does just seeing Ethan change clothes make my heart race so fast? Just as I was calming my heartbeat, the door opened again. Ethan was dressed in a black suit. He looked quite lean with his clothes on, but without them, his abs and chest muscles were all there, not a single one missing. Thinking about it, my face flushed again. Ethan looked at me helplessly. I didn't know you were coming. I just changed because my clothes got dirty. Are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. It's my fault for opening it without asking, I said hurriedly, waving my hands. Really? But your face is pretty red. Are you sure you're okay? He said, then reached out to touch my forehead to check my temperature. I immediately stepped back and quickly said it was nothing. Seeing my reaction, he couldn't help but laugh. Honestly, I hadn't seen him laugh in a long time. When we were kids, he used to laugh a lot. Ethan, you look much better when you smile than when you don't, I blurted out without thinking. Ahem. This time he was the one embarrassed. Your office is connected to mine. If you need anything, you can come find me directly. After saying that, he turned and went back to his office. But I noticed his ears seemed to turn red. It turns out Ethan can get embarrassed too. And so, I began my daily work routine at the Ethan family group right next door to him. As Ethan had said from the start, he hardly ever came home. Maybe because I spent more time with him, I became less reserved, and now his home almost feels like mine. Finally, after I gradually got the hang of company affairs, the contract with the Ryan family business was about to expire. Ryan had come a few times to the Ethan family group wanting to discuss renewing the contract with Ethan, but since I was still handling other matters, Ethan decided to postpone it for the time being. "Can you go by yourself?" Ethan asked with a hint of concern as he flipped through the new contract I had prepared for the Ryan group. I have to say, during the time working with him, I realized that although Ethan has become much colder now, once we got familiar, he was still the same as before, worried about many things concerning me, almost wanting to help me get everything done perfectly. Only after I repeatedly insisted on doing things independently did he start to hold back. This time, I was going to meet Ryan, and it was obvious he was a bit worried about me again. It's fine, I have no feelings for him anymore. I'm actually looking forward to the look on his face when he sees me holding the contract from the Ethan family group, I said, much more confident than when I first joined the company. I owed it all to Ethan's patience in teaching me so much. I arrived at the restaurant where I had arranged to meet Ryan, accompanied by Ethan's assistant. Judging by the choice of restaurant, it was clear that Ryan still valued the cooperation with the Ethan family group. As soon as I walked in, I saw Ryan, the man who betrayed me and tricked me into divorcing, taking most of our shared assets. I slammed the contract down in front of him. "Mr. Ryan, I'm here on behalf of the Ethan family group to sign the contract with you. I suppose there's no need for introductions?" Ryan looked at me in surprise. "Vivian? Why are you with the Ethan family group?" He was about to ask more, but then he remembered Scarlett had told him I worked at the Ethan family group and was quite familiar with the front desk. He probably assumed I was just a junior assistant there, sent by Mr. Ethan to sign the renewal contract. Ryan leaned back in his chair with a knowing look. "Vivian, which boss at the Ethan family group did you go to assist? Without me, do you have to resort to such despicable bed-hopping tactics just to land a job?" Sure enough, birds of a feather flocked together. Ryan and Scarlett were just as foul. How had I never realized it before? I had been completely fooled by them. "It doesn't matter who I assist. Ryan, maybe you should look over the contract renewal first before deciding whether to laugh or not," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down, taking a sip of the coffee on the table. "Who are you trying to scare, Vivian? I've been working with the Ethan family group for years. Do you really think you can stir up any trouble?" Though his words were full of bravado, the frantic flipping through the contract betrayed him. Sure enough, when he saw that 80% of the cooperation profits belonged to the Ethan family group, and that the contract forbade using the Ethan family group partner title to collaborate with other companies, such unfair terms, he completely lost his composure. "What the hell have you done?" Although Ryan no longer managed the company, after all these years, he could still understand this contract. Isn't it obvious that they don't want to cooperate with him? What can a little assistant like me do? "Ryan, why don't you just sign it? Otherwise, I'll go back and tell Mr. Ethan that you don't want to renew the contract with the Ethan family group." I looked at the man before me with mockery. The arrogance he had when he first arrived was nowhere to be seen on his face now. Whether Ryan signed the contract or not, the Ryan group would be ruined in the end. He glared at me fiercely, but with Ethan's assistant standing behind me, he couldn't make a move. "Ryan, I don't have that much time to waste with you. Let's call it a day. Maybe we'll work together again if fate allows." With that, I picked up the contract and left, leaving Ryan sitting alone in the restaurant. Originally, Ryan's family business only started to improve thanks to the support of the Ethan family group. Without Ethan's backing, the Ryan group was nothing more than an empty shell. I came home, tossed my things aside, and headed straight to the bathroom for a shower. Honestly, I hadn't expected it to be so easy to destroy Ryan with Ethan's help. Why would Ethan cooperate with the Ryan Group anyway? The Ryan Group had been a rotten, withered tree for many years. The water poured over my body, tracing my skin, and many things seemed to be surfacing little by little. When I get the chance, I must ask Ethan to explain everything clearly. After the shower, wrapped in a towel, I stepped out, only to find Ethan had unexpectedly come home. We looked at each other, and I glanced at the towel wrapped around me, then at him sitting on the sofa. I let out a scream and rushed back to the room. After getting dressed, I had to psych myself up before finally stepping out. As it turned out, Ethan was right at my door, and I bumped straight into him with a thud. Ethan caught me in his arms, preventing me from falling flat on the floor. "Are you okay?" His voice carried a faint, almost imperceptible hoarseness. "I'm fine," I said, covering my nose, though I wasn't really fine. The firmness of his chest muscles told me otherwise. After a moment of easing the tension, I looked up at him. "Ethan, can we talk?" He didn't seem surprised and gestured toward the dining table. On it were desserts he'd brought back, all the ones I used to love. He remembered everything. "Want a drink?" He took out 2 bottles of liquor from the fridge. Although I hadn't tried them before, they looked quite expensive. "Sure." We drank together, and I asked him about the collaboration with the Ryan Group, about saving me, and why he knew so much about what had happened to me over the years. Actually, I had a vague feeling deep down, but I just wanted to hear it from his own mouth. Perhaps under the influence of the alcohol, Ethan began to talk more. He told me that the reason for cooperating with the Ryan family was because he believed that helping Ryan get back on his feet was helping me, making life better for both Ryan and me. He saved me because he happened to be downstairs in my building at the time. Rather than saying he just happened to be there, it was more accurate to say that ever since Ryan faked his death, Ethan had returned to the country, and during those 4 years, he often found himself walking down to my building without realizing it. As for why he knew so much about me, Ethan looked seriously into my eyes. After a few drinks, the emptiness in his gaze was gone, replaced by a strange kind of emotion. I looked at him in confusion, but he remained silent. "Why did you stop talking?" I asked. "Because..." Ethan's face gradually filled my vision, and instead of words, he pressed a passionate kiss to my lips, the scent of alcohol spreading wildly between us. I felt as if I were getting drunk too. Ethan and I kissed with a reluctance to part. He suddenly lifted me and placed me on the dining table. One hand supported him on the table, while the other tightly held my head, drawing me closer to his lips. I didn't even notice when the wine bottle on the table was knocked over. The remaining wine dripped down the table onto the floor. "Because I love you, Vivian. I have loved you for a very, very long time. Why didn't you give me a second glance back then?" He kissed a trail from my face to my ear, whispering his confession with a voice full of desire. I recalled everything Ethan had done for me since the beginning, and my heart felt as if it were being gripped tightly. I cupped his face in my hands, stared deeply into his eyes, and then gently pressed my lips to his. Ethan was stunned by my actions for half a second, then he tangled with me even more fiercely. He carried me back to the room, the one custom-made for me. "Vivian, can I?" His voice was hoarse beyond recognition, as if a wild beast was waiting to be unleashed. Tears welled up in the corner of my eyes, and I nodded slightly at him. The room's lights stayed on all night, the window reflecting Ethan's intense love for me over the years. The news of the Ryan family conglomerate declaring bankruptcy made the headlines. Ryan was burdened with heavy debts, and Scarlett left him for a nouveau riche man who was already married but kept a harem of mistresses, with Scarlett among them. Once, the wife of that nouveau riche man showed up with people and beat Scarlett badly. If the police hadn't arrived in time, she probably would have been stripped of her clothes by the wife. As for Ethan and me, I nestled in his arms scrolling through my phone. Since we got married, Ethan had grown increasingly reluctant to go to work. "Why don't you have to work overtime anymore?" I asked him, puzzled. "The company has assigned someone specifically to manage that." My job now is to stay home and take good care of you, honey. Ethan was getting more and more cheeky, and before I knew it, he was already getting hands-on. Hey, let's be serious. I tried to push him away, but he grabbed my hand firmly. The air in the room gradually grew warmer and heavier.